It's my pleasure to now introduce you to our panel discussion with some incredible refugee athletes. For refugees, sport really is such an important pathway to success and also recognition, and an opportunity to be such incredible role models for others. And today we have one of Australia's great sporting champions, former Australian Test cricket captain, Ian Chappell, broadcaster and journalist and long-standing refugee advocate. Also, our Australia for UNHCR Special Representative, Ian Chappell, is going to be leading our panel discussion today. Thank you so much, Ian. Always such a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I see that I'm in conversation with our three special guests. I should warn you, I'm no Richard Fidler. He can sing. Firstly, I'd like to call upon Golgol Mebrahtu. Now, Golgol was born in Sudan, fled the Eritrean-Ethiopian War, and was granted refugee status in Australia. He's gone on to represent Australia as a footballer in the under-23 team, and he's currently playing for the Brisbane Roar in the A-League. He's got a beautiful smile. If you don't see it quite as regularly as normal, that's because, unfortunately, the Roar lost the semi-final on the weekend.
Yeah, we did, that's true.
Welcome to our lunch in Golgol. Firstly, if you could just explain, your young years and all the hardships that you had to go through.
Yeah, so like you said, I was born in Sudan.
Yep.
And the reason for that, I am of Eritrean heritage. My parents are both Eritrean, and they fled the Eritrean-Ethiopian War, which lasted from 1960 to 1991. And so a lot of Eritreans fled the war, displaced from their homes, and people like myself were born in Sudan, in Uganda, Kenya, and other places. And that experience, for the most part, we were sheltered from it because our parents wanted to protect us, me and my 6 other siblings. But at a certain point in time, when the war had settled, we moved back to Eritrea. And then it started again. And so my family moved back to Sudan for a year before we were lucky enough to seek asylum in Australia. And we had the opportunity to come to this wonderful country. And, it's given us a lot of opportunities in life. And my journey has been that I've become a footballer. But those early years in my life, in some ways, we were always refugees. Even when we were in Sudan. Even when I went back to Eritrea, I was never like the normal Eritreans who were born and raised there. So that's always been part of my life. But sport has been an unbelievable tool for me into acclimatizing wherever I've been. And especially here in Australia, where the majority of my life I've lived. But I've also played in Europe. As a professional footballer, and places where I didn't speak a word of the language. I had no one that I'd known in these areas, and sport has played a major part in my transition in life, wherever it is that I am, to bring me together with people and make me feel a part of the community that I'm living in. So that's a little history about myself.
What about the influence of your father?
Yeah, my father is a big man when it comes to education. He's always educationally driven, and that was the advice we'd received as kids. All my other siblings have finished all their tertiary university degrees and gone on to work in the corporate world. I was the only one that defied those wishes, but once he'd recognized that I had a talent and I was driven to achieve what I wanted to achieve, he supported me in that. and till this day, he has a big influence in my life. He's a man of outstanding moral character. And throughout all the hardships that we went through, one of which was at one point, our entire family was imprisoned when I was 7 years old. And I had younger sister, which was 2 at the time, and another one which was 5. So he always kept his values and always taught me that if you work hard and you believe in what you're doing, that keep going, because you'll be able to achieve success, and that's helped me a lot in my life.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got a sister who recently became a lawyer, so if you get into trouble, there's immediate
Yeah,
help.
yeah. I call her a lot, not only for just to get on a good side. She's great. She's actually helped me a lot with my contractual situations as well, whenever I've had any. But my family in general, we've got a couple of accountants in there as well, so I get a lot of stuff for free.
We've got some members of the Murray family here. Would you like to explain the influence that Les Murray had on your becoming a footballer, and also Craig Foster?
Yeah, I'd only met Les once before, and straight away he'd recognised who I was. But Les was someone who played a major role in my career, I would say, in my development as a person. Because football, when I was growing up, when I first came to Australia, it didn't have a big platform. SBS was the major platform for us, and Les was the one behind it all. And he used to bring all these stories about footballers and the upbringings that they had, a lot of them coming from disadvantaged backgrounds in Europe. And those stories were very motivational for me. And I remember specifically at a time when he used to advocate for African people, players of African heritage in this country, that we need to tap more into that. And it was, I still remember it every Sunday. My family would go to church, would come back, and I would be glued to the telly because I knew his segment was coming up. Yeah. And straight after that, I'd go and train because of the motivation it filled me with. So people like Les have played a major influence in my life, because he made me believe that there is a path for me, that there is opportunity for me to achieve success. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful that we had someone like Les in our community to help us and to direct us and motivate us. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story with us, Golgol. Yeah. I'd now like to call upon Akec. Akec Makur Chuot was born in South Sudan, spent 12 years in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, and had the misfortune to have her father die basically just after your birth. She's now become an Australian rules footballer and plays a bit of soccer on the side, she tells me, but is representing the Richmond club in the AFLW competition. Welcome, Akec. Would you like to tell us about those early years, and particularly the 12 years in the Kakuma camp?
Yeah, a bit similar to Golgol. I was born in South Sudan, and when my mum was a month pregnant of myself, Dad passed away, and she didn't know she was pregnant at the time. In our South Sudanese culture, it's totally normal to have many wives. So my dad was married to 7 at the time. So gentlemen, you can come talk to me afterwards. I can explain the protocol. So Dad was married to 7 wives at the time, and the reason for that was because he was the paramount chief of these people. So he was probably the youngest chief of his people. He was in his 30s, and 3 of his wives were pregnant at the time. So I got 2 other sisters named Akec, Makur, Chuot as well. And in South Sudanese culture, that name's given to basically the end of that generation. So I shared that name with my two sisters. My mum had an eye infection, and at the time in Sudan there was still a lot of conflict. Dad just passed away with 12 of his brothers that same day from a tribal conflict that was going on. So mum developed eye infection, and obviously small things that we take for granted in Australia, where we come from, very major things, and there was no medical facilities which facilitate for her treatment. So we had to go to the neighboring country, and that neighboring country was Kenya. So we eventually made the trip to Kenya. It was my mom, my auntie, because I was a very chubby kid. I don't know what happened, but it's tragic. And mum just could not carry me by herself. So we eventually had to take my auntie, Amal, with us. So there was the three of us. We set off on this unknown journey. Mum didn't know any language that all the countries we were eventually going to go to, which ended up in Uganda, and then went to all the different borders. Mum explains to me, she actually explained to me earlier this year that since I was born, nothing's ever been easy. Obviously, Dad passing on. And then when we got to Uganda, there was an Antonob attack in the village that we were staying at. And my mum and I were displaced for about three hours. They didn't know what happened to me. They thought something had happened to me with that attack. It just happened that some family took me, saw me just sitting, playing, and ran off with me. And then they found me at the camp. We eventually finally made it to Kakuma, where after mum got the treatment in Nairobi, where we stayed for a little bit, my uncle said, why don't you guys go to Kakuma, see if there's better opportunities there for you and the kids. We just basically stayed in Kakuma for that time. We were in Kenya until we left in 2005. My family were finally granted. And I think the attitude in Australia with a lot of Australians is that, refugees, we just sit in these camps. For a lot of us, we went to school. Agencies like the UNHCR provided us education. They provided us hope, where we can wake up in the morning and go to schools and, get education so that we can actually hope for better futures. And 16 years later, living in Australia, I am an Australian rules football player. My older sister just got elected into the WA Parliament as the first South Sudanese Australian in the North Metropolitan region. That to happen to a single mum who had so much determination, strength, to raise 8 children by herself, who, all of us have really done well because of that hope that was that instilled in us, and the opportunities that were given to us living in a refugee camp. And the donations that you guys give today, or you've been giving, or your families gave like 16 years ago, probably went to my family and I. So yeah.
Terrific. Yeah. And how did you become an Australian rules footballer?
Oh, I was, just like a lot of young African kids. We don't really know what footy is. I grew up with my older brothers who were very mad soccer fans. And in the Kenyan refugee camp, Kakuma we were at, it was always just soccer. But because it was only the boys that were allowed to play soccer, I always got pushed to go and play volleyball, because that was the only sport that was available for the girls. I did not like it. I just liked to sit on the sideline and just watch the girls go at it. But I just always wanted to play soccer. And I would make any excuses to just go to the soccer ground with my older brothers. So I would say, can I carry your boots to soccer? And just make any excuses up. And then that's just slowly they introduced me to soccer. And it wasn't until I came to Australia in 2005 where I went to school, and the teacher was like, you can actually you can sign up for a local soccer team. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you can go and play for a local soccer team. And yeah, that's basically what you do. And I went home, I was so excited. I told Mum. Mum was like, yeah, I don't have a problem with it. But it was my older brother that had the problem because, our norm as Africans is that, young women, sports is not for us. And for me, I was this determined 12-year-old that just wanted to play soccer. And I would, go to soccer training. I'll come back home, I'll be grounded. And all I was doing was playing soccer. And the only place that I was allowed to go to was church and school. And I was just like confused. And it was a battle for about a year, battling with my older brother. And then finally, Mum stepped in and said, look, she's just playing soccer. I hear she's really good at it. Why don't we just encourage her to do it? So finally, I was allowed to play soccer. When I was 15, I got selected for the All-Australian Schoolgirls. I went to China, represented the state and Australia in that competition. And then it wasn't until I was 19 where opportunities in soccer just kind of went dead for me because I had an opportunity to come to Sydney and, play here in the National League. But my mum said no because I was 18 at the time and she just wasn't comfortable with me moving across the country all the way from Perth. Perth is a far place. And Mum was just like, nah, you're not doing that. So I kind of had to make a decision either to go and play another sport. I was always very good at sports. I was either going to play footy or basketball. And I just looked at footy and I said, look, there's all these fans that are just cheering for these teams. I don't know what's happening, but it just looks like a lot of fun. And I am going to play footy. I don't see a lot of girls like myself playing it, but I'm going to play footy. So I started in 2013. Within the first couple of weeks, I got selected for the state team. And then I went from the state team. I don't know what they saw, but it was all happening. It was just happening really quickly. And then the AFL announced that the inaugural AFL women's competition was going to be launched. And at the time, when you live in Perth, I don't know if a lot of you guys have been to Perth, there's two teams, West Coast Eagles and the Fremantle Dockers. And when I came to Australia, the only one team that was doing good was the West Coast Eagles. Yeah. And the Purple Army did not win a premiership, so I just did not understand them at all. The Eagles had good-looking men, and they had a better team song. So I said, I'm just going to barrack for that team. And that was basically how it all started. So when the inaugural competition was announced, the Fremantle Dockers were the ones that got the team. I was excited for them because I was like, well, good for them. At least they get to boost up their fan base with the women team. But I was like, I'm probably not going to play for them because I just can't see myself playing for the Fremantle Dockers. Draft day came. It was a different situation. Again, I didn't want to move state just yet. Then I nominated for the state-based draft, and then the Fremantle Dockers picked me up as in the first AFLW competition. That's how it all started.
Terrific. Thank you for telling your story, Akec. I'd like to now call upon our third guest, Asif Sultani. Asif was born in Afghanistan and moved to Iran as an asylum seeker. He's Hazara, so felt bullied and persecuted, and he found the solution to that. He took up karate. And in 2017, he won the New South Wales World Cup trophy. And just recently, he missed out on selection, unfortunately, for the Olympic refugee team in karate. Asif, welcome.
Thank you.
Asif, those early years for you must have been pretty hard to take.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, when I was about 7 years old, my family and I, we fled Afghanistan due to ongoing conflict, war, and persecution. And I remember the journey from Afghanistan to Iran was terrifying because we were stopped by the thieves along the way. And they took the only belonging that we had with us while they were pointing gun at us. And I was only 7. So I was, terrified and I was crying. And therefore they started hitting my dad because they was telling him that keep your kids quiet. But I couldn't help and I was only 7. When we arrived in Iran, we were not only being persecuted for being a Hazara, but also for being asylum seeker and undocumented. So I used to get bullied a lot for being a Hazara kid, asylum seeker. So I used to get punched, kicked, and people used to spit on me and telling me that I should, kill myself because I will never going to be as good as everyone else. And I used to question myself that whether that's true or not, because I did not have the same opportunity as other kids. So just seeing other kids going to school, just playing, like that's what the normal kids do, and I had to just focus on survival as a kid. And that was a very hard thing for me to grow up, just focusing how to survive. And therefore, I took martial arts to protect myself. After going to dojo for about 3 months, and my instructor told me that I'm not allowed to go for training anymore because I'm an asylum seeker and undocumented. I was heartbroken, and I again started crying and questioning that why all this happening to me, and what's wrong with being a Hazara? What's wrong with being me? I didn't choose to be that. I just born at it. It took me a couple of weeks just thinking and talking and complaining and blaming my dad. And then one day it occurs to me that if only I can create my dream, then only I can crush it. I started gathering a few of my friends together in my backyard, and we started training together. And I used to watch Bruce Lee's movie. It wasn't a fancy sport we used to train, but pretending to be like him. I used to watch the same movie over and over again, and just in my head, okay, I want to be like him. I would like to, stand up to the bullies, and I would like to be a successful martial artist one day. So I did that and until I was 16 years old. And yeah, so I faced a lot of obstacles, hardship, challenges that I had to overcome that through my, with martial arts, because I think when we're talking about martial arts, people don't only think that it's more about punching and kicking, but it's more than that. So what I learned from martial art was respect, resilience, discipline, honor, and loyalty. And those are the lessons that I will be carrying with me for the rest of my life, and I would like to pass on that to the next generation.
And the influence of your mother in your life?
Absolutely. My mother, she is a very resilient person, and when I was 16, when I was deported back from Iran to Afghanistan, my mom came to visit me behind the bar, and she tried to embrace me and telling me that I was old enough to look after myself, I was strong enough, and I had to just believe it. And she promised me that you just have to, wherever you go, whatever happens, you always have to remember that your fight must be stronger than your fear, son. And I always remember that with me, that I truly believe that, especially as an asylum seeker and a refugee, if we want to survive, our fight must be stronger than our fear. And yeah, that was one of the hardest moments of my life, to saying goodbye to my mom, behind the bar, and trying to hold myself together at the age of 16 and not knowing what's the next, what's the next step.
And you weren't able to go to school until you were 18?
Absolutely, yeah. I was never allowed to go to school in Iran because, as I said, I was an asylum seeker and undocumented. And when I when I came to Australia by boat, and then I spent a couple of months in the detention center, and then I started going to high school at the age of 18. So English is my fourth language. It was really challenging. But I always, even when I was a kid, I always wanted to go to school. I just wanted to feel that, being with other kids. I missed a lot when I was a kid, just being a kid. But I was fortunate enough to start high school in Australia, in regional area in Maitland, at the age of 18. As you might know, that most of you guys graduate when you're 18 years old. But for me, just going to high school, and the community and the people, the staff members, and the students were very accepting. And I even met my high school sweetheart, now is my wife, over there at school.
Terrific. Just finally, we've just got a couple of minutes left. If you could, a lot of today is about inclusivity. So if you'd all like to just talk about what that means to you guys. You want to start first, Asif?
Absolutely. I think as a refugee, when we lost everything, like for me, like after 18 years, I'm still asylum seeker. I was asylum seeker for 14 years, and I've been a refugee, a temporary refugee, for 4 years. And I don't know how long that's going to take for me to become a permanent resident. I don't know, another 18 years? And to become an Australian citizen, I don't know, maybe my kid will become citizen before me. But something that I would like that everybody knows about refugees, we did not choose our lives. We did not choose to be persecuted, to be separated from our families, or to leave our homelands. As a refugee, I have seen one of the darkest parts of humankind, but I never lost my fight on humanity, because I always knew in my heart that there is good people existed in this world, and good organizations such as like UNHCR, and people like yourself. So that's the proof today. Your support, your help means everything to us, because as a refugee, we lost everything. We lost our homelands, we lost our family, and the only thing that we have is you guys, people and community. I think that having that sense of belonging means everything to a human being. So now, me living in Australia for past 9 years, I honestly, wherever I go now, I just want to go back to Maitland, where I live, and that's, and I think Maitland is the best place in the world, and that's because I feel that I belong with the community, with the people, and by showing your support, I think you're making that possible, because it's really important for a person feel that they belong somewhere or in some community.
Well said. Very well said. Okay.
I think he's pretty much said everything that I was going to say. For me, as a young South Sudanese woman, I remembered when I started playing footy, I went to a carnival day, and the way those parents embraced me, the way they accepted me, the way they welcomed me, I thought they were on something. They were giving me oranges and all these different things, and I was just like, what's happening here? But it was that sense of belonging that made me go back to football. It's that sense of belonging that 8 years later, I am able to fulfill my dreams. I'm able to play at the Richmond Football Club and be able to tell my story there and represent my family, represent my community, and represent all the women that were told no, especially for my community. And I think that's what inclusion is to me. Being included, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background is, no matter how tall or short your skin color is. And as Asif said, you know, a lot of us don't just wake up and say, oh, we're going to leave our families behind. There's my mom who has two parents still alive. You know, she has not been with them for over 20 years, you know. And seeing my mom go through being a parent by herself and raising 8 kids with 8 different personalities by herself was really difficult. And to come to a country where you know no one, you don't know how to speak the language, and you are basically, you know, being prosecuted by your fellow citizens that are living, your neighbors. Your neighbors don't even, I don't even remember the first time my neighbors said hi to us when we first came to Australia. It was almost people looked at us like we're this big problem that are here. And it's like, if we can all accept and love one another as the human race. I recently said in a documentary, you know, whether you're rich, broke, poor, whatever you are, when you die, you go on the ground. We're all going to the same place at the end of the day. So until we can get back to the basic fundamentals of what makes us humans, which is we're on this planet together, and whether you're a refugee, you're a migrant, you're an asylum seeker, you live in the richest suburbs in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever you live, you know, until we can have people who are united like this in a room, who have the same vision of helping each other so that we can come up together, then that's what inclusion is. And I feel like it's refugees feeling a part of the community. I've got cousins and aunties and families in Melbourne who feel very out of place because of everything that's happening in Melbourne. And it's up to me as a 28-year-old woman who should just be living my best life, you know, hanging out with my friends, doing the things that my 28-year-old fellow Australians are doing. But instead, I have to step up as a leader, I have to step up as a role model to represent my community, to be a spokesperson for my community, when all we want to do is just fit into the community and belong. So for me, that's what inclusion is, being a part of the community.
Thank you. Golgol, you've got the final word.
Thank you. These fine young people have already covered most of it, but I would just like to say something small in terms of refugees. A lot of times we see them as people whom we have to help, but people sometimes forget what these people can give to us and what they contribute to our society as well. Oftentimes, I'm sure many of you here would know of stories of people that have gone to third world countries and have been like their perspective changes completely when they see that people who have very little in life, but their joy is so full. And a lot of refugees that come to this Australia, like Asif was saying before, that they're looking for safety, they're looking for a better life, they're looking for a better future for their families. And these people have something that oftentimes gets overlooked, and it's that joy that they have in their heart that they carry in their everyday lives and if we tap into that, they can be outstanding citizens in our country. And organizations like UNHCR, they give us this opportunity to have hope, to have a future. So everyone that's supporting and donating, I'm very grateful for it. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having us. And I look forward to the changes that we can make collectively.
I think we should be thanking you for firstly having the courage to tell your stories in front of a crowd, and secondly for the contribution you've already made to Australian society. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Asif.
Thank you.
Akec.
Thank you, Ian.